Starting Monday, travelers from China must submit a negative PCR test after entering South Korea. The new rule comes over concerns of a surge of cases following Beijing's lifting of zero-COVID policies. South Korean President Yoon's New Year's address put much emphasis on reforming labor, education, and the pension system. Topping the New Year's plan is revitalizing the economy. The war in Ukraine continues in the new year. Russia launches more strikes on Ukraine and says it has targeted Ukraine's drone production capabilities. Good morning and welcome to New Day at Arirang. We start with COVID-19, with countries around the world implementing stricter travel restrictions against China, and that includes South Korea. Our Song Yujin reports.
With China grappling with a crushing wave of COVID-19, South Korea is implementing stronger travel restrictions. From Monday, travelers from mainland China coming directly by plane or boat are required to get a PCR test within 1 day of arrival.
We've secured enough personnel and screening centres capable of testing 550 people every day. 3 testing centres and 2 waiting areas will operate at Incheon International Airport for non-Koreans staying less than 90 days. For those who test positive, we've prepared a temporary shelter that can hold up to 100 people. They'll quarantine there for 7 days, and we're planning to open more.
Korean nationals and non-Koreans entering from China and staying long-term must get tested at a public health center and stay home until their results come out. For effective tracking and tracing, passengers must enter their contact information to the Q code or the quarantine information pre-entry system before boarding their flight. And all flights heading to South Korea from China must land at Incheon International Airport for a while. The government will also stop issuing short-term visas for Chinese nationals, with an exception for diplomats, public officials, and those visiting for key business and humanitarian purposes until the end of this month. But that's not all. From Thursday, all travelers must also show proof of a negative PCR test taken at least 2 days before they leave, or a rapid antigen test taken at least 1 day before departure. These rules were announced last week to prevent a new virus wave or even a new variant entering from China. Countries around the world are taking similar steps. So far, at least 14 countries have implemented travel restrictions on Beijing. They include the United States, Japan, Canada, and Australia. Most of them are asking for proof of a negative PCR test. European Union officials will meet this week to discuss their joint response. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
The South Korean president focused his New Year's address largely on carrying out 3 major reforms, namely in labor, education, and the pension system. Although he made no mention of North Korea in the speech, he did address the North's provocation head-on at a separate meeting with the JCS. Our editor-in-chief Moon Gun-young has the details.
President Yoon Suk-yeol began his very first New Year's address as president with an analysis of the economic situation. As interest rate hikes are inevitable to keep inflation under control, and as the risk of a global economic recession is higher than ever before, Yoon pointed to exports as being key to overcoming the multiple crises.
모든 외교의 중심을 경제에 놓고 수출 전략을 직접 챙기겠습니다.
He also pledged to kickstart a project to help South Korean businesses receive $50 billion in overseas orders and usher in an era of startup Korea not only in IT, bio, defense, and nuclear power industries, but also in carbon neutrality and entertainment. Warning there is no future for a country that is preoccupied with vested interests in rent-seeking, the South Korean leader urged 3 major reforms: labor, education, and pension.
노동시장을 유연하게 바꾸면서 노사 및 노노 관계의 공정성을 확립하고 근로 현장의 안전을 개선하기 위해 모든 노력을 다하겠습니다.
Highlighting that the dual structure of the labor market needs to be improved, he explained that the starting point for the labor reform is establishing rule of law in labor relations. On education, Yoon vowed to transfer relevant authority to local areas and provide support so that they can link education to their specific industries, and to submit a legislative proposal on a pension reform to the National Assembly after conducting scientific research and investigation on pension finance, collecting public opinions, and referring the issue to public discussions. Although the South Korean president made no mention of North Korea in his 2023 New Year's address, Yoon ordered the military to decisively retaliate against Pyongyang's provocations at a separate virtual meeting with the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, warning that North Korea will continue to launch provocations using various symmetrical and asymmetrical means while advancing its nuclear and missile threats. This just hours after the North launched a new ballistic missile and its leader named Seoul an undoubted enemy, calling for an increase in short-range nuclear weapons. 문건영, Arirang News.
North Korea is ramping up pressure on South Korea, with leader Kim Jong-un saying Seoul has become, quote, an undoubted enemy. According to North state-run media on Sunday, Kim made the remarks on New Year's Eve, adding that the situation calls for an exponential increase in the North's nuclear weapons arsenal. South Korea's defense minister in response warned that any attempt by the North to use nuclear weapons would mean an end of the Kim Jong-un regime. Now, this comes as North Korea tested ballistic missiles twice over the weekend. In his New Year's address, South Korean President Yoon put much emphasis on managing the local economy. He also laid out plans for reforms in labor, education, and pensions. For more, we have Professor Song Se-ryun of Kyung-hee University with us. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
First of all, what do you think is the motivation behind President Yoon's push for an urgent need to reform in labor, education, and pensions? I mean, why these three sectors?
Well, it seems clear that he sees the mission number one for the nation and for his office is to navigate through the tough economic terrain. So the whole New Year's message is centered around how to get back to economic competitiveness, innovation, and export. So the labor, education, and pension are, on one hand, the long overdue reform messages, but are particularly crucial in shaping new economic environment for Korea. So taken together, he seems to envision a flexible labor market, a tilt towards more business-friendly environment, more decentralized education policies, as well as rationalizing pension schemes. Now, these are all conservative agenda and more market-based reforms. I think that his policy colors are becoming more clear and vivid.
Right, and also Yoon pledged to, again, power through economic difficulties in the new year through exports as well as diplomacy. I mean, how crucial is diplomacy when it comes to managing the economy, especially during this administration?
Right. Diplomacy usually go with the security and economy, but recently the new Cold War era means that diplomacy takes on a heightened meaning as countries are sort of forced to take sides. It seems like there are two different ecosystems of supply chains developing. So for a country that depends on U.S.-led security system and also trades heavily with China, this is a conundrum and a diplomatic challenge. So diplomacy going forward could be very crucial in terms of who we trade with and how that affects our relationship with key allies.
Right, I agree. The economy and diplomacy always come together, especially during this era. And what did you find particularly notable in the address? Any part of the speech we need to pay special attention to?
Well, it was a short message, 10 minutes or so, but I do take note that once again, the whole speech is couched in the notion of liberty. He often invoked that value, but before it was kind of vague and conceptual. But it is taking on shape and fleshing out more and more. The liberty he sees is more economic notion, along with fairness and opportunity in the market. He sees the need for reform to bring more market-based rationale rather than some ideology-based social engineering projects. Again, and that's what we expect from a conservative government. So at least his messages consistent. Another thing I note is it is kind of disappointing that the address was done without any media present. No Q&As and no mention of working together with the main opposition party. This made his speech feel like a sort of a one-way communication. I think it betrays his pledges of transparent communication and the legislative cooperation that his projects require. The press, undoubtedly, is very important to the president because it's the principal intermediary between the president and the public, and the relationship with the press is a very important aspect of a president's effort to lead the public opinion. So in that sense, I think that there has to be a more effort to make his policies known in terms of how he communicates with the public and also press corps.
Sure. And before we let you go, one more question. There was no mention of North Korea in the New Year's address. Why, and did this surprise you in any way? Well,
not really, because he was focusing on economy as his primary agenda. So he was forsaking other agenda in the first place. But I do note that North Korea, despite the recent provocation, is absent in a very spectacular way, which means that North Korea should feel that they were slighted. I think that this president's policy, this government's policy, is that they're not going to even mention or even respond to North Korea's provocations because North Korea wants the attention that way, and this government is determined not to give in that way.
That's right. We'll keep a close eye on the North's moves, especially in the new year. All right, Professor Song, thank you for your insight this morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. My pleasure. Thank you.
The global economy is facing a tougher year in 2023. That's according to IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva on Sunday in an interview with CBS. Georgieva attributed to the grim outlook to economic slowdowns in the three big economies. That's the U.S., Europe, and China. In October, the IMF cut its outlook for global economic growth in 2023 to 2.7%, citing the Ukraine war, inflation, and high interest rates. Since then, China has scrapped its COVID-19 policy, but the IMF chief warned that the surge of infections there is likely to further hit regional and global growth. South Korean troops stationed overseas celebrated the New Year. From the UAE to waters of Somalia, soldiers serving abroad vowed to keep on fulfilling their duties in the New Year. Our Paeun-ji reports.
At the start of the new year, South Korean soldiers stationed overseas are vowing to complete their missions and remain on duty. In the United Arab Emirates, the South Korean Army's AK unit is responsible for providing support to the UAE Special Forces and has been conducting joint exercises with its military.
As we represent South Korea as part of the country's military diplomacy efforts, the AK unit will do its best and fulfill its responsibilities.
In the waters off the coast of Somalia, the country's Cheonghae unit has been protecting South Korean ships from pirates.
Today, even at this very moment, the Cheonghae unit is conducting operations to safely escort ships in the Gulf of Aden. All of us will work together to fulfill our duties perfectly in 2023.
The Army's Dongmyeong unit wished South Koreans a Happy New Year. The unit was first deployed to Lebanon in 2017, and since then it has been maintaining peace in the region as part of the UN peacekeeping forces.
동명부대는 국군 최장기 해외 파병 무대라는 자부심을 가지고 레바논의 평화 안정을 위해 완전 작전을 하겠습니다. 국민 여러분, 새해 복 많이 받으십시오.
Paeun-ji, Arirang News.
In Korea, people often kick off the new year by watching the first sunrise. These sunrise viewing sites have been closed for the past 2 years due to COVID-19, but they've opened up again this year. Our Kim Hyun-sung reports.
A bright start to the new year. On Haeundae Beach in Busan, people once again formed big crowds to watch the first sunrise of 2023.
People have been coming here since the morning twilight, eagerly waiting for the first sunrise of the year. And when they caught a glimpse of the sun peeking over the horizon, they made their first wishes of 2023.
I came out at 5 a.m. because I live quite far away. I came to wish for my family to be healthy in 2023.
I'm a high school senior this year, so my wish is to get into a good college.
I wish to be together with my boyfriend for a long time.
So I'm from Iran, and as you might know in the news, it's happening, a revolution, a movement is happening. So my New Year's resolution is freedom for Iran and for my people to be happy and free.
People also whipped out their phones to capture the moment. This is the first time in 3 years that the beach has bustled with early birds making wishes at sunrise. For the 2 last New Year's, sunrise viewing events were suspended due to COVID-19. But with social distancing measures receding, other popular sunrise viewing spots have also rebounded, from Ganjeolguk Cape in Ulsan to the beaches along the east coast. In Busan alone, local authorities estimate that roughly 106,000 people came to view the sunrise at the 27 spots that held events.
It's really nice because I had only experienced Korea during COVID times. It's my first time after it got better, so I'm very excited.
I think it's amazing, and this is the best way to start the new year. In America, we're usually sleeping, so this is awesome.
I'm so glad that these events are once again coming back with the COVID pandemic receding.
The year 2023 starts with one less worry than the previous year. Hopefully, the rest of the year remains as cheerful as its start.
Happy New Year!
Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News, Busan.
For a look at news from around the world, we turn to Lee Seung-jae, who's standing by at the Arirang News Center. Good morning, Seung-jae.
Good morning to you.
Now, let's start off in Ukraine, where Russia began the new year again with further attacks against Ukraine.
That's right, Tommy. Russia's defense ministry said Sunday that it had carried out an attack on Ukraine's military-industrial infrastructure involved in the manufacturing of unmanned attack drones. Now, the ministry noted that it used high-precision, long-range air-launched weapons, adding that the attack had disrupted the production of attack drones and destroyed their launching sites. Now, Russia says these strikes are part of plans to thwart Ukrainian attacks against Moscow. Now, in the first 24 hours of the new year, Russia carried out 31 missile attacks and 12 airstrikes across the country, which authorities say killed 3 people and injured 50 others. Now over to Brazil this time, where Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was sworn in as president on Sunday, the 3rd time he has held the country's highest office. Now, during his inaugural speech, the veteran left-wing politician vowed to rebuild a country that he said had been left in terrible ruins. The 77-year-old also pledged to undo the legacy of his predecessor's government, which he said involved depleting funding for education, health, and the conservation of the Amazon rainforest. Meanwhile, former President Jair Bolsonaro, who was defeated in last October's elections, left Brazil for Florida to avoid having to hand over to Lula. Now, Catholics around the world continue to mourn the death of former Pope Benedict XVI. This, including current head of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, who during his New Year's prayer called Benedict a gift from God. U.S. President Joe Biden, along with other world leaders, also shared their message of mourning on their social media platforms. Now, the body of the former Pope will lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica and remain there until his funeral, which is set for January 5th. Benedict died aged 95, almost a decade after he stood down because of ailing health, becoming the first pontiff in 600 years to resign. And now finally, Croatia has now become the latest country to use the euro as its official currency, replacing the kuna. Now, coming into effect as of January 1st, 2023, Croatia becomes the 20th country to adopt the euro. Croatian authorities say that the 70% of ATMs in the country will distribute euro banknotes from the turn of the new year, while the rest will follow within 2 weeks. Both currencies can be used for the first 2 weeks of January. Now, when paying with the kuna during this period, change will be given in euro.
Good morning. To dress warmly for the first workday of the new year, cold air returned to much of the country with cold wave alerts issued for most areas. Feel like temperatures in Seoul are about -10 degrees Celsius. However, morning temperatures in southern parts of the country are a couple of degrees higher than the same time yesterday. Seoul will have highs that are only -1 degree Celsius today, but feels more like -4 degrees all day. And tomorrow's morning temperatures will be even lower than today, staying freezing through tomorrow. Afternoon temperatures will be 4 to 5 degrees lower today under sunny skies. Daegu seeing a high of 4 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Daejeon, Gwangju topping out at 2 degrees, with dry weather alerts remain in place on the East Coast. Sunny skies to be a feature for most of the week, with either rain or snow in the forecast on Friday in central regions and Jeollado provinces, and the cold snap will ease a bit on Wednesday afternoon. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
That wraps up this edition of New Day at Arirang. Happy New Year wherever you are, and thanks for watching.
부산항에 그리운 내 형제